Those that have listened to the podcast over the last year will know that I've got high hopes of making a career in sports media and broadcasting. Today, my guest is someone who I genuinely believe is one of the best presenters in the game. From his car outside of Villa Park ahead of Aston Villa against Man City this evening, I'm joined by BeIN Sports' Matt Critchley. Matt, I really look forward to this conversation when we got it organised, and I know to say that you're busy is a complete understatement. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. How are things?
Yeah, no trouble at all, Max. And listen, that's a big build-up, so I hope not to disappoint, but it's very kind of you to say those words. Yeah, it's a really, really busy time, as you can understand. We had the announcement, we're recording this on a Wednesday evening, and we had the announcement of the proposed Super League on Sunday afternoon, and then all through Monday, and then clubs dropping out on Tuesday, and then we're here to see Man City for the first time tonight. So, yeah, lots going on, but looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask, how many times did you have to update your notes between last night and tonight?
I didn't even bother starting them last night because so many things changed so rapidly yesterday. And I think that's, to be fair, that's one of the fun parts of our job. I mean, we're so lucky to get to watch football, particularly with what's happened in the world over the past 12 months or so. But we're so lucky to watch football. But for every day to be different and to have situations cropping up like the Super League, it's no matter what any journalist tells you, they're there for the thrill, for the buzz of finding out information, for news, for information of that's constantly shifting and changing. And I think when Chelsea, or when we first found out that Chelsea were going to be dropping out the Super League, and then it seemed like Manchester City, we found out that we're going to follow suit as well, and then all the others had no choice really but to follow on from those two. It was a fun day. It was a tense day, but I think it's the sort of days that all of us live for, really.
Yeah, certainly. And just to stick with that topical issue quickly, I initially was quite concerned with the concept of the European Super League. I genuinely thought it had enough steam behind it to become a reality. Given the commercial developments in European football over the last 30 years, I'd say, I thought it would be a real possibility. And I think everybody owes a big thank you to the likes of Jamie Carragher, Gary Neville, who were brilliantly outspoken the other night on Monday Night Football. I thought they conducted themselves brilliantly. And of course, the fans for making their voices heard, proving that fan activism isn't dead in this country. As a professional broadcaster, how have you seen this unfold over the last 72 hours? What have you sort of made of the ups and downs?
I think the key point for me is that I don't believe fans per se are against the idea of a breakaway league from the UEFA Champions League. I think that Manchester City fans have a lot of problems with UEFA, rightly or wrongly. Liverpool fans, I think fans generally aren't convinced that UEFA have it right, particularly with the new reforms that have just been passed, which means more games, more revenue, and an easier way for clubs that don't qualify for Europe to get in through a backdoor route. I think that the big mistake that the so-called Big Six and the Super League made was making it a closed shop. I think if they'd have come with an announcement saying, listen, we're coming up with a very similar plan to the Champions League, but we're going to, don't call it a breakaway, but we're going to come up with Champions League Mark II that we've made ourselves. We want to keep more revenue for ourselves, but we basically want to cut UEFA out. I don't think people would have had quite as much a problem with that as the proposals they had. I think it was the fact that they wanted to make it virtually non-competitive. They wanted to make it a closed shop. What I'm saying here is I don't think people are too bothered that UEFA would have been left behind. I think people were just bothered with the concept of the Super League, and that was the big mistake. Not consulting fans, not speaking to people. That's the key thing about journalism. You have to speak to people. You have to talk. You have to communicate. That's what Liverpool didn't do. That's what Manchester United didn't do. Arsenal and Tottenham were clearly just happy to be in there. What we know, Chelsea and Manchester City were taken in late on and basically thought we don't want to miss out, so we'll have to agree to it almost. Last in and first out subsequently. But I just think they got the strategy wrong, they got the communication wrong, and they got so many different things wrong in the end that there was no way out for them. And once Chelsea announced that they were leaving after 2 days, I mean, why sign something so big? Why make such a huge statement and then only be in it for 2 days? It shows that just not enough thought was put into it at all. And we all sort of scratch our heads as well and think, surely these businessmen and these people of positions of power, they must know what they're doing. What are we missing here? But so often, as people have been quoted as saying, don't overestimate these people. They might have power, but they don't necessarily have either intelligence or responsibility. So it's just been a sad time, I think, the last couple of days, in terms of fans feeling distant from their club again.
Yeah.
I think that's true, not necessarily of Manchester City. I don't think the reaction towards their owners has been too severe, but I think with Liverpool and Manchester United, we've had fractious times, of course, we know, with their ownership over the last 20 years. It's just widened that gap between them, and it's now at a situation, I think, where I don't think FSG could stay at Liverpool. I don't think they'll be allowed because the fans won't forget this. And I think we'll go back to a situation, if you remember, with the Glazers when they first took over and the green and gold and FC United being formed. I think that will regrow again just after it's settled down after all these years. I think that the feelings towards the Glazers will be known when fans are back in the stadium. So it's just been a really unfortunate 72 hours.
Yeah, certainly. You touched on many of the different narrative points that people have taken issue with over the last, as you say, 72 hours. For me, just quickly, I think the just at a governance level, I mean, you highlighted earlier on in what you were saying, the American almost closed shop, closed league franchise system, which is something that loads of people flagged. But for me, it was just the fact that it would be internally regulated, with Florentino Perez as chairman and the Glazers as co-chairman. That for me, I don't see how that doesn't fall under conflict of interest. But anyway, something else that you brought up that I'd like to talk about is, you bring up the elements of, this is why people go into journalism, and switching it more to you, in particular with broadcasters who I think highly of. I always feel like there's a lot that I can learn from them. And with yourself, I've often seen you deliver pieces to camera, and they're like, would you consider yourself a journalist rather than a broadcaster, say?
No, I think I'd probably consider myself a broadcaster, because I think a journalist is a slightly different skill, and I think I'm more leaning towards a broadcaster than a journalist, because we have to present the information in a different way. A journalist, his main focus and his only real focus is to get that information, and then he can relay it as soon as on Twitter or on a newspaper article. The idea of a broadcaster is that it's so much more complex to get that information across, in terms of having to have cameras, lights, equipment, everybody in the right place. Lots of different things have to work together to simply get that information out. So it's a different type of skill, although I love the journalistic side of the job as well, and just digging for information. You just have to be a bit nosy. That's what that's what a good broadcaster and a good journalist is, somebody that wants to know what's going on and wants to tell people about it. That's all it is, really, ultimately. But I suppose just in terms of my own background, I never really saw myself as working in TV. I happened to sort of stumble into a journalism degree all those years ago at university, and then found TV within that, found a TV module that I liked, and then my sort of fledgling TV career started from there, really, which was, just getting the work experience, BBC, places like that, back in the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, and I'm moving on from there. So a lot of people in my industry want to be on TV, love being on TV, and love being recognised, and love the sort of the feeling of being on TV. I'm sort of the complete opposite of that, and I think that's probably one of my strengths, because I don't really have any desire to be known or recognised or on telly. It just is a job that I've sort of found, and I've found I'm quite good at. So yeah. I think not having that desperate desire to be to be liked, to be to feel like I'm sort of a somebody on telly, I think that probably works in my favour. And that's the only piece of advice I'd give out to anybody who's trying to follow in my footsteps, I suppose, is that if you want to be on telly, go and be on a reality show. If you want to do the job that we're doing and do it well, do it for the right reasons, which is that you love sport, you love football, you're a bit nosy, you like to find stuff out, because the sort of glamorous side of it lasts a little bit, and the unglamorous side of it, which is like me talking to you in a car with, if I just pan my camera around my jacket, stuffed over the window to stop the sun coming in. It's sort of, it takes over as well. So, yeah, I mean, everyone's different. Everyone sees it differently. That's just the way I look at it particularly.
Yeah, and that I would say on that, that's something that particularly come through in your work, and this is something for a lengthier podcast, I would say, but I genuinely think that television's dying. I think with all these different mediums that are available, podcast in particular, which is a long time interest and passion of mine, that television's dying, and there's all these different, the bandwidth available now. Anybody can essentially be a broadcaster, but you need, as you say, to have those certain instincts and principles in order to rise to the top, which I'm hoping to do over the course of my career. Just quickly, as you were saying, you study broadcast modules, and I essentially feel like I studied at the Etihad campus for the last 3 years, studying business and media, which, just in my opinion, I feel like it primed me to be a journalist. I'm good at writing, I've always enjoyed it, but I really am interested in the challenge of verbal communication, relaying information to camera. I think, as you say, it's a different skill set and it poses different challenges. As I was saying about yourself, that relaying of information concisely, I think you tick the boxes in regard to those principles, and I genuinely, as I say, I think that's why you are very good at what you do. What would you say some of the principles have been that you've stuck to over the course of your career, even if you did learn them earlier on, say, for example, at university?
Preparation. They're sort of obvious things, but a lot of people don't do them. And a lot of people who aren't very good at this job don't do them. Preparation is key. Being obsessed by the job and the sport. So a lot of times I'll get asked questions and I'll have that knowledge in my head because I listen to the radio on the way down to the game. I don't listen to Radio 1 or I don't listen to a music station. I listen to a sports station. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I think of is reading the newspapers, find out what's going on. You've got to be obsessed by it to know everything. So if you know everything, whatever question they ask you, you've got somewhere to go with it. So preparation, being obsessed with it. And something, when you're live, anything, it's the best sort of feeling, it's the best sort of TV we do. But when you're not live, which is for me probably 50-60% of the time, practice. There's nothing wrong with practice. I practice. I've been doing this job 17 years, 18 years now. I still practice before I go on air because I want to make sure what I'm saying makes sense. So you'll often find me, and people will probably see me at the side of football grounds, mumbling to myself, walking up and down behind a camera. That's just me, not necessarily rehearsing the whole 2 minutes that I'm about to say to camera, but it's just getting key points in my head.
Yeah. How
many games has Harry Kane scored in? What's the stat on Virgil van Dijk? When did he last play for Liverpool, or whatever it might be? So they're the key principles, I suppose, about preparation, knowing your sport, knowing your subject matter inside out. There'd be certain jobs I couldn't do because I'm not obsessed by those sports. I'm not obsessed by that subject. But with football, I would put my knowledge up against most people because I consume it all the time. And then practice. They're the key things. And if you do that, everyone's got a mobile phone. No reason why you can't be blogging and doing practice videos and stuff to camera all day, every day. Then, that you won't go far wrong.
I can certainly empathise with that obsession with football and that drive to obviously get into a place of prominence. And you touched on it earlier, the fame element. Somebody once told me that fame, along the lines of fame is fleeting, but power lasts forever. So genuinely, I feel like a lot of people, when they see people on a big screen, doing pieces to camera, they often sort of brush them off as, oh, they're so fortunate to be where they are. But genuinely believe they don't see the dedication and the effort that gets put into reaching that position of prominence. What would you say along the course of your career have been the defining moment, or, for example, mentors that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, well, I mean, sort of briefly, I touched on it earlier. I started off just work experience at the BBC with guys on Northwest Tonight, and just made a good impression with the right people at the right time. And a good impression, let me tell you, and I know work experience, it has to be done. It's horrible. You're sat at a desk. Nobody really wants you there. You kind of feel like you don't want to be there. You don't really belong. You've got nothing to do. But a good impression's just being in the right place at the right time, being polite, making a cup of tea, bringing in a box of chocolates at the end of the week. It just sets a tone, keeping in contact by email. And you know what? Again, I've been on the other side of the coin many times with work experience when I worked at Liverpool. And some of them just turn up and flick and sit on the phone all day. And you think, well, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to give you anything because you're not giving me the impression. So I think back 20 years when people like Richard Askham, Howard Booth at BBC probably saw something in me where they thought, well, he's nothing at the moment, but he's got the right attitude, so we'll give him a chance. So what they did is they offered to, my first ever paid work in this line was logging tapes on the Commonwealth Games in 2002. I sat in a dark room for 2 weeks and just logged tapes. And you know what? I couldn't believe I was getting paid for it. I think I got paid £50 a week. I think I got paid £100 for 2 weeks' work, £10 a day, and I was absolutely made up with it. Couldn't believe it. I thought it was the best day ever because I was watching sport and getting paid for it. So, that kind of has to be the attitude. And still now, I get paid to watch sport. And I wake up every day and I go, I'm so lucky to work to get paid to watch sport. So, yeah, from there, I did various jobs. I worked in newspapers briefly. I went to a startup TV channel, which was called Channel M, which was a Manchester TV station when City TV was a thing back in sort of 2004, 2005. And the great thing about that was that it was a great place to learn and make mistakes because I wasn't very good. I hadn't done it before. But, my first sort of real experience in the industry was in a channel that not that many people watched. So you could make mistakes and get away with it. And people like Andy Crane was the presenter, and he was a prominent figure from 80s TV, but had gone into radio and was doing that and gave me huge amounts of advice. And from there, I moved on to Liverpool. And I went into Liverpool actually as an assistant producer. That was the job I was given at Liverpool in 2007. But again, I said to them after a couple of weeks, I do present to camera as well. 2 years later, I was, part of a presentation team. So I suppose it's the key things again are it's just about the right impression that you're going to make on people because jobs aren't advertised really, Let's say a job came up at any one of those channels that I've just mentioned there. They're going to go to people that they've internally used and seen at work experience. They're not going to advertise them because they're good jobs. They want to be able to trust those people. They want a bit of an insight. So make contacts, get some work experience, get in, make a good impression, show the right attitude, and then, things just tend to happen the right way for you.
Yeah. Certainly, attitude is most definitely another principle for any aspiring presenters that are listening. And another thing, Matt, I mean, you touched on loads of things there that I'd love to delve into deeper, like the developing technology going from, independent stations to LFCTV, for example, and how that's changed over time to what we're at today. And, podcasts are still very much developing, and the space, I believe, long form. People can learn by making mistakes and getting better, and just consistency, doing it as time goes on. There'll be hours and hours and hours of many people's podcasts where they've grown to become one of the most prominent podcasts in the world. And something else that I'd like to ask in regards to development is, obviously you're a northern lad, and one of the things that I really struggle with is my voice. Obviously, you can tell I've got the most horrific Scouse accents in the world. But I was speaking to Gary Taphouse yesterday and went into this quite deeply with him. But I'd be interested to hear from you, as a northern lad. Like, How did you manage to master and develop a relationship with your voice for broadcasting?
Well, the first thing I'd say is never see having an accent as a weakness, because that's your biggest strength. And, you can never, you might look at television 20 years ago and say, oh, it was all RP and it was all sort of the Queen's English. But we've gone full loop from that. So broadcasters now are encouraging accents, and that's seen as a strength, not a weakness. So never. I can remember, I won't say who it is, but I can remember being in university 25 years ago, and there being a Scouse girl, and she was told, you can't do radio, you can't do TV because of your accent. And she just accepted it, and she went on to do print. And I thought that was really, really strange and really harsh at the time. But that was the advice that was given. Now it's a completely different world, so don't worry about that. The one thing I would say, I suppose, is that even in the early days when I got the job at Liverpool, I was still working on my voice. I was still working on presenting, working on voiceovers, which is not an easy skill. No. Working on how to present the information. But you know what? There's no rocket science to it. It's not something you learn, but it is something you learn. It's not something you can either do or you can't. You just practice. It's
It feels subjective to the individual.
Yeah, some people love the way. I love the way some people do it, and I don't like the way other people do it. But other people, everybody sees it differently. I have broadcasters that I look up to, that I aspire to be like, and so their voice grates on other people. It's different. So everybody has their own unique style. You've got to develop your own style, I think, with a sort of mentor in your head. But it goes back to what I was saying before. It's just about practice. It's just about repetition. It's just about get some advice, but also the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And I feel bad saying that because it sounds so simple and so obvious, but it's just about doing it. It's just about going over it, and every podcast you do and every video anybody ever makes, the next one will always be better than the last one. Yeah. So it's just repetition. The more you do, the better you get, and the better your chances are of moving on and progressing.
Definitely. All about the reps. Now, something else, just quickly, because I know you're soon to shoot off into Villa Park, but I've spoken to journalists about covering games during pandemics, print journalists. I've spoken to commentators about covering games during the pandemic. How have you found it as a presenter, attending games during the pandemic? Because you can't exactly wear a mask when delivering a piece to camera.
Yeah, it's been different, and it's been a year now, so it's been something we've just got used to. And in a strange way, we'll have to get used to fans being back again, because they were back for a short time in sort of November, December, and then they sadly had to disappear again. Listen, I was late for recording today because of the traffic around the ground, and no person that attends football will ever tell you that they'll be glad to see traffic around the grounds before and after the game again. So let's get that right. That's the only benefit I can possibly think from our selfish point of view about fans not being here, that the traffic in theory is supposed to be better. But it's been really hard to get used to the lack of atmosphere, and I think that's where a lot of sides have struggled. It's well documented. For us, you don't really realise it, you don't appreciate it until it's not there. And we've all seen how football has suffered from not having that. So from my point of view, the differences are, we go to a game now, we have to fill in a questionnaire, a medical questionnaire before we arrive at the ground. We have to arrive at the ground, temperature test, all sorts of different accreditation tests and all that sort of thing. We then go into the ground. And I suppose the job is not dissimilar then to normal. We're pitch side. Obviously, when we're doing the post-match interviews, we're more distanced and outside, whereas we used to be right on top of managers and speaking to them face to the face and inside. So that's the main difference. They've sort of made it as good as it can be, but we just all want to go back to the way things were. And will it ever get to that? I'm not sure, because I think just generically speaking, I think they'd probably rather we had a bit of distance from the players, because if it's coughs or colds or any sort of illness, you'd rather be 2 meters away from these guys than, if you're a player, you'd rather be 2 meters away from us than us right in your face.
Yes.
So whether it ever goes back, I don't know, and that would be a real shame, because it's hard to when you're right on top of someone and you're staring into their eyes, that's the beauty of the job, because whatever they say, you've got to react to. When it's 2 meters, it's not quite the same, and that's a shame. And that's been difficult for all of us to get used to. But yeah, they're the main differences really. And you know, I don't need to say it. Everybody says it. Everybody can't wait for fans to be back. But the key thing is they can't wait for the atmosphere to be back. They can't wait for the whole package to be there together, because football is great. We have all been privileged to watch fantastic games and fantastic players. But without the atmosphere that a big game creates, that fans of any game create, then it does feel pretty hollow, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well put. And just before you shoot off, the original Super League clubs haven't had the best of results following the pandemonium of the last 3 days, with Liverpool and Chelsea drawing against teams you would otherwise expect them to beat. And I say that with respect to Leeds and Brighton, but that just enforces how unpredictable and exciting legitimate competition is. City have re-established themselves, I feel, as the best team in club football at the moment. I know Barcelona have had a great start to 2021, but I think Pep's team, the champions-elect, are starting to look back to their old ways. Can you see Villa potentially causing an upset tonight, or are City just going to do the business?
Well, I didn't do the FA Cup semi-final because that was down in London. One of my colleagues covered that, but I did City's, I think it was City's last Premier League game, unless I'm mistaken, which was at home against Leeds. And they were beaten, and it was a surprising defeat. So they were beaten in that game. They were beaten against Chelsea, so we can't rule it out. I'd be surprised. I think the key thing for City is that I don't disagree with you. I think they are the best, well, certainly the best footballing side in the world right now. But they're also the best side in this situation because they're sort of ice cold. They don't need emotion, City. They play without emotion. Whereas I think a side like Liverpool, for example, absolutely 100% play on emotion and need a crowd and use the power of the crowd to sort of inspire them. Yes, tactically they're very good as well. It's not just about that, but it's a big part of their game. Whereas I think City play like it's a training game, and they have the best technical players. And if you have the best technical players, you have the best technical team, and more often than not, you win. And that's what's happened. So the key thing is clearly the Champions League for City. Can they get over that hurdle? So I think against Villa tonight, that they'll probably get back. I mean, they play Paris Saint-Germain in a week's time, and that will be in the back of their minds. You can't deny that. But I think against Villa tonight, I see them just going through the gears, really, and beating Villa. I think I was here last season when they beat them 6-1 or something like that, and it was one of the most comfortable afternoon strolls you've ever seen. Villa sat deep. It was a wrong tactic from Dean Smith. We spoke to him about that afterwards. So tonight, I think City will beat them comfortably. But it's the great thing about football. We never expected Leeds to beat City. I'm not sure we really expected Chelsea to beat City in the FA Cup semi-final. It's the unpredictability. We can't have games that don't mean anything. Every game has to mean something, and it does. Even if we think City are going to win the league, they're going to win it comfortably. They probably will, but you just don't know, and that's what keeps us all coming back.
Yes, most certainly, Matt. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, even if it was for a brief time. I'd really look forward to having you back on the podcast for a lengthier occasion if the chance presents itself.
Anytime, mate. You absolutely look forward to that.
Brilliant. So, thanks for listening, everybody. And Matt, let's do it again.
Thanks, Max.
Enjoy the game.